What is going on, guys? ESG here, back with a new FPL video. In today's video, I'm going to be going through my latest draft ahead of game week 1 and some of the changes that I have already made and some that I am still looking to make. As always, if you do enjoy the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are new. And with that being said, let's get into the team. So to start off with, I'm going to be having a look at the goalkeeper and the defenders that are in my current draft, starting off with the goalkeeper. So in every team that I've built so far, I've had a 4.5 million goalkeeper, and it's the same in this draft. I have Dean Henderson there now, who's come in instead of Robert Sanchez from Chelsea. Now, with the Chelsea goalkeepers, it's unknown who is going to be starting because they have just signed a new goalkeeper and they still have about 7 goalkeepers on the book. So it is unknown who would be starting, which is why I've gone away from a Chelsea keeper. But out of the 4.5 million goalkeepers, I don't really like any of them, if I'm being honest. You've got Flecken from Brentford, but Brentford's fixtures are awful to start the season, and I can't see too many clean sheets there. Even Dean Henderson from Palace might be a risk. I know that at the minute he's looking like he's going to be number 1, but with Palace potentially offloading Johnson and bringing in another goalkeeper, the keepers that they have been looking at are Ramsdale and Kelleher, and I can't see either of them going from being a number 2 at the club they're already at and being a number 2 at Palace. So if one of them comes into that Palace team, Henderson probably won't be that number 1 anymore, so I may have to steer away from him. And then even Sells and Miguel from Nottingham Forest, it's unknown who would be the number one there. In pre-season, Sells has been playing and Miguel hasn't been. But again, anything can happen in the league and they could just be rotating week in, week out. So for now, I've gone for Henderson there. I do have 0.5 million left in my budget, so if need be, I could bump that up to a 5 million goalkeeper, but at the minute, I'd rather not be doing that, just because I'd rather spend those funds elsewhere if I do need to upgrade in game week 2 or 3. So that's why I've gone for Henderson at 4.5. For my secondary keeper, as you can see on my bench, I've gone for Fabianski from West Ham. Now, it could be any 4 million goalkeeper. I don't think any of them will be starting. If you did want to go for one that might start, then you could easily go for Flecken as your starting keeper and then the second goalkeeper from Brentford. But again, the fixtures aren't great, so I'm personally not doing that. I've only gone for Fabianski on the off chance Areola gets a knock, because then Fabianski would probably be starting. But for now, it is just a bench player and a bench filler. He won't be coming onto my team at all. Moving on to the defenders. Now, I've not really made any changes apart from one on the bench, which is Robinson coming back in, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But if we look at the starting 3 that I am going with, starting off with Konsa, I'm not fully convinced with Konsa at the minute, and I am looking for other defenders, but none of them at 4.5 are doing it for me. I didn't want to go for another Palace defender because I do have Henderson in net, and that would mean doubling up on the defence. And if they concede a goal, that's already no clean sheets there at all. So I don't really want to be doing that. There's then Mikalenko from Everton. There's been links about him potentially leaving, so I don't really feel comfortable bringing him in on the off chance after one game he either gets a suspension or leaves, and then I have to waste a transfer bringing somebody else in. So with Konsa at 4.5, Villa's fixtures are nice, and even though they're against West Ham to start, and then they have Arsenal at home for the second game week. For that second game week, Robinson would be coming on anyway, and Konsa would be getting benched. But even for that first game week, I'm not a fan of Konsa against West Ham. I think with the signings West Ham have made, they'll do decently well at the start of the season, especially against a rocky Villa defence. So I am and ahhing about who to bring in, and I'll get in a little bit after I've looked at the rest of the defenders, something that I am thinking of doing, but it just depends how it works out. Moving on to the second defender, I've still got Trent Alexander-Arnold. Is that premium defender, pretty much guaranteed game time. I'm playing as a right back role that gets inverted and getting forward. I can see a lot of assists, potentially goals, and he's on set pieces. I think we already know that. So Trent's a no-brainer for 7 million. And if need be, if he is playing really bad or he's not playing, I can easily downgrade him to a 6 million in Saliba or Gabriel. And then I have 1 million to spend elsewhere on the pitch. And then Gvardiol at 6 million. Now, based on pre-season, Gvardiol has actually played, and Pep has already said that players who are coming back late from international duty won't be playing too many minutes in the first few games of the season. So that's like the Phil Foden, Rodri, players like that. So with Gvardiol playing in pre-season, I'd say he's almost locked on for game time. And with him playing more of like a left wing back role, with Ipswich in game week 2, I can see him being essential in that game. I think it'll be a clean sheet, and he could even get on the score sheet, especially against Ipswich. I could see him getting on the score sheet like he was at the end of last season. So that's why I've got Gvardiol there. I was going to go for Saliba or Gabriel, but I just, with some of the fixtures Arsenal have, I just couldn't bring myself to do it at the minute, which is why I've gone for Gvardiol. Looking at the bench options that I've got, so I've got Barco and Robinson. Starting off with Barco, he's there as that 4 million defender. Now, it was looking like he was going to get a lot of game time, especially with Estepinian coming back from an injury and having surgery. But it is now looking like Brighton might be signing a new left back, and if that happens, Barco's game time is just going to plummet and won't be there. So I might be going elsewhere for a 4 million defender. Even though it is mainly a bench filler, I'd still like somebody that will be playing quite a few minutes. So I might be looking at somebody like Burgess from Ipswich, or maybe Johnson from Ipswich. I think he might get a little bit of game time. So I am keeping an eye on that, but for now I've got Barco though, just because they've not signed anybody yet, and it is looking like he will be getting some minutes. And then Robinson from Fulham. Now, I've benched him for game week 1 because they're against Manchester United. But in game week 2 and 3, they have Ipswich and Leicester. And then even after that, the fixtures are pretty favourable. So Robinson is a nice 4.5 million defender to rotate with other defenders from other teams. So I will be rotating him at the minute with Konsa, but that probably won't be sticking. I think I will be going for somebody else instead of Konsa. But Robinson is there for later game weeks when the fixtures get really nice. Now, one thing I was looking at doing, now Liverpool have one pre-season game left to play, and that's going to be tomorrow on Sunday. I'm recording this on the Saturday. And there is stuff going around at the minute that Quansah might be looking like the favoured centre-back alongside Van Dijk, because Konate just isn't impressing the new manager too much now. If that happens, I would be tempted to drop Konsa for Quansah from Liverpool, and then downgrade Trent to somebody like a Saliba or a Gabriel, one of the Arsenal defenders that is guaranteed minutes, because Arsenal have Wolves in that first game week, and with Pedro Neto now leaving Wolves, I can't see Wolves being too great going forward this season, and especially until they sign somebody else, and I can't see it happening before that first game week, so it could be a guaranteed clean sheet there. It all just depends on whether Quansah is going to be that starting centre back next to Van Dijk. If it's looking like he is, for the first few games especially, I probably will end up doing that, bringing Quansah in for Konsa, Trent down to a Saliba or a Gabriel, somebody like that. It then gives me an extra million to spend elsewhere, so I could upgrade my goalkeeper, I could upgrade in midfield, upgrade in attack, and there is something in attack that I was thinking of doing, that if I go for that in defence, I might do, but I'll get to that when I get to the attackers. But I want your thoughts on that. What do you think about Quansah potentially coming into my team, if he is going to be that starting centre-back at Liverpool? Or would you stick with somebody who you know is guaranteed minutes, like a Konsa, or maybe go for an Anderson or a Munoz from Palace, or somebody else? Just let me know in the comments. So now moving on to the midfield, and I've brought in a couple of new players here, and one of them is a player that I said I was 100% not going to bring into my team a few weeks ago, but now it is looking more like he's going to be essential. So I'll get to that at the end, but starting off with the players that are the same. Starting off with Mo Salah, I think Mo Salah is just that player that you know he's guaranteed minutes in that Liverpool squad. He's on penalties, he never disappoints in FPL. Even when he is having a bad game week, he still manages to get a return and get you up in the points tally. So that's why I've gone for Salah. I still stick with what I said of Salah or Haaland being essential. And for me, just because of funds wise, I do think that Salah is a little bit more essential than Haaland, which is why I've gone for him, especially with the fixtures that Liverpool have to start the season. Ipswich away, Brentford at home, Man United away. Even with Man United away, Man United's defence isn't looking great. And with the new defender being out and even Højlund being out, I can't see them being too much of a threat against Liverpool, unfortunately. So that's why I'm sticking with Salah. And chances are I will stick with Salah for the remainder of this week coming up, and he won't be leaving my team ahead of game week 1. Moving on to Eze now. Eze, I am questioning. There has been links previously about Eze potentially leaving Palace this summer, but nothing ever came of that. But with Man City now getting rid of Alvarez, could they come back in for Eze? Potentially, yes. And if across this next week there are any links of that, I will be dropping Eze and potentially bringing Gordon back in from Newcastle now. I've dropped Gordon from this team and I'm not liking it. I do feel like Gordon is going to be essential. But again, there was links of Gordon potentially leaving Newcastle, and I know nothing's been mentioned recently, but I think towards the end of the season, if he gets his way, he could end up leaving and wearing a Liverpool shirt come the end of the transfer window. So again, I'm not too convinced about Gordon. So I've got a little bit of thinking to do there. Do I downgrade Eze to a 6.5 and free up some funds, or do I go for a different 7.5? I'm not sure, but for now, it's looking like I'm going to keep Eze. Even though Mateta has been playing in the France Olympics squad, he kind of had his break in between the end of the Premier League and the Olympics starting, so I can't really see him needing much of a break after that Olympics final, which was yesterday. And I just feel like, if anything, it's going to make him more match fit, so he'll be on penalties. I think we already know that. So could Eze be as much of an asset? Maybe not, but with him being on other set pieces, I am keeping him for now. Looking at my bench as well, I've put Nkunku on the bench only because I can't see him doing anything against Man City. It's the game weeks after that I'm wanting Nkunku for, and I didn't want to spend 10.5 million on Palmer. I do feel like, yes, Palmer will be that top scoring player from Chelsea, but I feel like 10.5 is just a lot to spend. So Nkunku at 6.5 is 4 million cheaper. So I'd rather just go for him. In pre-season, he's been looking really good, even though he's said he's still struggling with a few injury niggles. I can see him starting majority of games and playing majority of minutes. The new manager seems to like him. He's been playing in different positions. He was playing as number 9 and number 10 and number 8 on the wing. He can play literally anywhere. So I think he'll get a lot of game time in that Chelsea team. And with some of the fixtures looking decent, I'd like to have him in for them. And then moving on to the two players I have brought in, starting off with Bukayo Saka. Now, a few weeks ago, I said I would never bring Saka into my team and he's one to avoid. However, with Saka being on penalties, he played in the preseason game against Bayer Leverkusen, and even though he didn't score, I'm pretty sure he assisted Havertz's goal. I might be wrong about that. But with him being on penalties, he's a guaranteed starter, guaranteed majority of minutes. Some of the games Arsenal have are decent. Wolves at home is a good game. Villa away isn't the best game, but then I can't quite remember who they've got in game week 3, but I think that's meant to be a good fixture. Then after that, they have Man City. They've got a couple of tricky fixtures again, but I feel like Saka for minutes wise and to get another semi-premium in there, I think Saka's probably a little bit more essential now. I was going to go for Son here, but with Spurs now signing Dominic Solanke, I think Spurs will play Son out on the left wing. Now, yes, in previous seasons he's done extremely well on the left wing, but will Son now have the penalties, or will Solanke take those penalties? Nobody really knows. And with them not really having another pre-season, I don't think we are going to see. So I don't really want to take that risk of going for Son and him not returning as much as he previously has, which is why I think Saka is probably at the minute a no-brainer. I'd like to have an Arsenal asset in here, and with Saka's ownership not being as high as some of the others like Palmer and even Foden, Saka's just doing it for me a little bit more than the others at the minute, which is why I've gone for him. But I want your thoughts in the comments about me going for Saka and whether you think it's a mistake or not. And then moving on to my budget midfielder, should we say, and that's Emile Smith-Rowe. Now, this means that I don't want to spoil anything, but it means that I'm going to be tripling up on Fulham, which I don't really like. Now, Smith-Rowe can be any 5.5 million midfielder. I've had Minter there from Brighton, who's been playing as that right winger, and I think he'll be getting a lot of starts, but Brighton's fixtures aren't really doing it for me. There's Harvey Elliott as well, but I didn't want to triple up on Liverpool, and with Harvey Elliott's minutes being a little bit risky, maybe not. Hudson-Odoi from Forest. Yes, Forest fixtures look really nice, but will Hudson-Odoi be playing every game? Maybe not. He got benched in the last preseason game. Is that a sign of things to come? Who really knows? So I've gone for Smith Rowe there. Now, in Fulham's last preseason friendly, he started ahead of Pereira, which is good to see. So in previous seasons, Pereira has been that more number 10 role as that attacking midfielder. But in the last pre-season, Pereira was dropping back to more of a defensive midfielder role where Paulinho would usually play, and Smith Rowe was the one playing more forward. Now, if that's happening in the actual season, I think Smith Rowe could be an incredible asset. I think he could, as that number 10, he could get on the score sheet quite a lot. And even if he's not on the score sheet, I think he could get a few assists to the striker, which is playing up with, which is looking like it's going to be Manice, which I'm liking with his ownership not being too high, and with Smith Rowe ownership not being that high either. I think he's an incredible differential to go for at 5.5. But again, I want your thoughts in the comments about that. What do you think about that midfield four that I've got starting and Nkunku on the bench? And is there anybody that you think I should be bringing in or looking at instead of some of the ones that I do have in? And with that being said, let's get on to the three attackers that I have gone for. So finally moving on to the forward line that I have gone for, and I've set this team up as a 3-4-3 for the first game week, but that will be changing week by week depending on games that certain teams have. But if we look at the forwards that I have gone for, starting off with the most expensive, which is Ollie Watkins. Now, in my previous updated draft, I had got rid of Watkins, but the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking if I'm not going for Haaland, I sort of need to go for Watkins. I think last season he was one of the top goal scorers. He was one of the top point scorers as well. And I think this season he'll probably replicate it. He played extremely well in the Euros with England when he came on off the bench. And with him now having a little bit of a break, I'm not quite sure if Villa have any more pre-seasons, but Watkins is that player for Villa that you know is going to be starting pretty much every game. Even with Villa having Champions League football, Watkins will still be playing majority of games, so that's one of the players that I feel comfortable going with, knowing that he's going to be playing majority of minutes, majority of games. He'll be on the score sheet. We don't know if he's going to have penalties or not. Chances are he won't because they do have the likes of Tielemans that is a good penalty taker. But Watkins gets so many goals from outside play that it's just a no-brainer really going for him when I'm not going for Haaland. Moving on to one of the players that has stayed the same, which is Alexander Isak. So Muniz and Isak are both the same, but Isak has been in every draft that I've built. And at 8.5, again, not going for Haaland, I kind of need to go for Isak. Having Isak and Watkins instead of Haaland seems so much better to me. I think there's a lot more value for money there than just going for Haaland. And with Isak being that number one striker, yes, Newcastle have signed another striker with Wilson being injured a lot, but I can still see Isak being that number one striker. And with him being the penalty taker for Newcastle especially, he'll get on the score sheet so much. Last season, when Newcastle were getting a really decent fixture run, I brought Isak into my team a few weeks before the fixtures got nice, and he delivered in all those games before and all the games where the fixtures were really nice. And with Southampton as that first game, some could argue he's actually a really good captaincy option against Southampton instead of going for Salah against Ipswich, because that is the 12:30 game and they're away from home, whereas Newcastle are the 3 p.m. game and they're at home to Southampton, who are newly promoted. So there is a bit of an argument there, who do you captain for that first game week? So having Isak there, for me, no matter who I bring in, whether I bring in Haaland next week or not, Isak is one of those players that will be staying. And then moving on to Manice at 6 million. So Manice, Fulham's fixtures are incredible. Manice is going to be a frequent starter for them. Is he going to be taking penalties? Probably not, but that doesn't really matter. I think last season when he was actually playing, I know he didn't start every game, and it was towards the end of the season that he started to start more frequently, and he was delivering in quite a lot of games. And I think this season he'll be that number one striker instead of Raul Jimenez, and he'll get on the score sheet from that first game, which is why I'm actually starting him against Man United. As I've mentioned, United's defence isn't looking great. Yes, it's looking like they're going to sign De Ligt from Bayern Munich, but I'm not fully convinced. He's very injury prone. Yoro, who they signed, is already injured. Will De Ligt be up to speed for that first game week? Probably not. And it all depends on whether they manage to get him in or not. So I feel comfortable starting Mason that first game week because I feel like against United, first game of the season, chances are Fulham manage to get a goal or two, and Mason will get at least one of those, in my opinion. So that's why I'm starting with Manice. Now, as I mentioned in my defence, there was something that I was planning on doing in attack, and that all depends on if I bring Quansah in. So if I bring Quansah in instead of Konza, and I downgrade Trent to a Saliba or a Gabriel, that gives me 1.5 million remaining in my budget. That then means I can keep Smith Rowe with my 5.5 million, and then upgrade Benice to a Dominic Solanke from who now plays for Spurs. It's looking like he will be that starting striker at Spurs. Whether he's on penalties or not, I don't think it matters because with the team around him now, chances are he'll get a lot of balls into him. And last season, we saw what he did with that Bournemouth team. I think, if anything, he'll replicate it at Spurs, if not do better. And some could argue he'll be the top scorer this season. Will Spurs win any trophies? Probably not. It's Spurs. But will Solanke get on the score sheet a lot? Will he be Spurs' new Harry Kane? Some would argue yes. Some would argue no, he's not as good as Kane. But I feel like he's going to have a huge impact at Spurs. And at 7.5, he is a player that I am, in over this next week, I'm going to be looking at trying to work him into my team. Does that mean I can't go for Haaland? Most likely, yes. Does that bother me? Probably not, because I have Salah. As I've mentioned in my previous video about who's more essential, yes, you can have both, but I'd say going for one of them is probably better because then it allows you to spend elsewhere. And for me, with Salah being that little bit cheaper, I'd rather have Salah and go for some more expensive players elsewhere. And then even in attack, you can have a really strong attack without having Haaland. So I want your thoughts in the comments about all that. What do you think about that front line that I've got? And would you try and work Solanke into your team with him now being at Spurs? So there we have it, guys. That is my updated team and the changes that I have made. So as always, I want your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about that team for game week 1? Would you be looking at making any changes for that, or would you say that team is strong enough to go into game week 1? As always, if you did enjoy the video, make sure to hit that like button and please consider subscribing if you are new. And until next time, thank you for watching.